Hunter is suing fellow motorist Jason DeLeo for pepper spraying him during an incident of road rage. Jason claims Ernest came after him with a crowbar.
Order. All rise. Yes, case number 542 on the calendar in the matter of Hunter versus DeLeo.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Judge Price has been sworn in. You may be seated. Ma'am, have a seat.
Mr. Hunter, it is your claim that the defendant in an act of road rage maced you. Mr. DeLeo says that he was defending himself because you were actually attacking him, and he's counterclaiming for having him falsely arrested. So why don't you, Mr. Hunter, let's start from the beginning. On what date did this happen?
20th day of April.
What were you driving?
My 1500 Chevy pickup truck.
What time of the day was this?
8 o'clock in the morning, Your Honor.
Describe to me what happened, Mr. Hunter. As
I got to the 2nd Avenue in Glenwood, Mr. Delaney was behind me, and as the light changed to green, he honked his horn, and he proceeded to pass me. So I'm going to work, so I don't want nothing to hold me up, so I proceeded back in front of him. Before...
All right, so now let's stop a little bit so that we make it crystal clear what happened, Mr. Hunter. You were in front of Mr. DeLeo.
Yes.
There was a light.
Yes, ma'am.
The light changed. According to you, you weren't moving fast enough, so he honked his horn.
That's correct.
He came around and passed you.
Yes, ma'am.
Got in front of you.
That's right.
Then you came around and got in front of him.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Okay, so now you're in front of him.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, now I'm in front of him, and he cannot come back in front of me because
He couldn't come in front of you?
He couldn't, no, ma'am.
Why?
Recently here, they started changing the golf course to one lane, making it accessible to bikes to ride on the side of the road.
So now you're in a single lane, and he's behind you?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
And I proceeded to the next major traffic light, which was Candler, where the accident happened in Glenwood. And he came up on the left side of me, on my side of the truck, and proceeded...
Just a minute. He came up on your side of the truck so that there's a passenger seat in between the two of you?
Correct.
Fine. So there's a passenger seat in his car.
Yes, ma'am.
In between the two of you.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Okay. As he was yelling, what's your problem? I happened to turn and look over that way. He had his arm over across the passenger seat and had let down the window about so much. And he started spraying me with mace, or pepper spray they call it. And that's the stain of how intensely it was on my shirt.
I'm not interested in looking at your shirt, sir. I have no idea what that is.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
I have no idea what that is. So you're telling me he sprayed something at you, but from his side, over the passenger side, in between your two cars, and he sprayed something at you.
Correct.
And then what happened, Mr. Hunter?
Okay, now I proceeded to try to get out of his way, a stream of fire. He just kept spraying it, and I started feeling around in my truck, which I know I had some tools up under my seat. So I came out my truck when he kept on spraying me, but the light changed, and I couldn't make it to him.
You're missing a whole big piece there, Mr. Hunter.
I came out my truck.
But first you got something from your truck.
Yes, yes.
What did you get from your truck, Mr. Hunter?
Something to stop him from spraying.
What did you get from your truck?
A trailer hitch.
And show me with your hands, how big is that?
It's about that long.
And what's it made of?
It's made of steel.
So you bent down, you got yourself a big piece of metal, you got out of your car in order to get away from him.
Yes.
I'm just following you.
Okay.
You got out of your car in order to get away from him.
Yes.
And?
I couldn't get away from his hands, so I proceeded.
How about just pulling your car away?
It's a red light there, Your Honor.
No, so you just left the car at the red light, you got a big metal pipe and went up to him.
Yeah.
That's what you were going to do?
That's
what
right.
were you going to do when you got to him, Mr. Hunter?
Knock that can out of his hand.
Knock the can out of his hand?
That's correct.
How were you going to do that? By poking through his window?
If I can get my eyes open, I would have tried to hit, but I couldn't get my eyes open.
I'm having a difficult time believing you, Mr. Hunter.
Yes.
Very difficult. Okay. You understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good. So now you're outside of the car with the pipe.
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened next?
And he could see the light change, and I did get a glance of his hand, but by the time I swung, it accidentally hit his back glass, and he left. He pulled off.
Now, why don't you tell me what happened, Mr. DeLeo?
Okay, ma'am, I was...
Plus, you have a counterclaim, and that counterclaim is for false arrest.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
The expenses. I was behind him at a red light. He paused and turned green, so I kind of toot nothing, you know.
All right, so you honked the horn. That's just ridiculous. Go ahead. Keep going.
So I made a right turn in front of the guy. At that point...
Now, just a second. Why did you do that, sir?
He was
I'm just asking you a question.
No problem. I was going to work. I was in a hurry. So but I did very civilized. I right side of his thing, put a blinker on, got in front of him. At that point, it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane. And that's when he passed me, almost running me off the road. And that kind of irked me a little bit. So we pull up next to the red light. I'm on the left, he's on the right. Not a beautiful spring day. Our windows are down. Looked over at him and said, "What are you doing? He could have caused a wreck. What are you doing?" I mean, still bickering back and forth.
Yeah, just a second. You're screaming inappropriately at each other.
Yeah, like 2 school kids, you know, immature.
I got it.
So I said something to the effect of, "You crazy old fool, you're gonna kill somebody." And he says, "You crazy old fool, I'll show you crazy old fool." And he's rummaging down on his floor for something. At that point, I'm getting kind of defensive. I mean, you know, so I had a mace in my hand, and he came up, took his belt off, came out of the car, and then he proceeded to raise it. The light turned green. I took off, and it smashed my window so hard that he put a hole in my door.
How did he get maced?
What do you mean?
How did he get mace in his face?
When he was coming out,
You left out that part of your story.
I'm sorry. Okay, it was when he came out of the car. I wanted to repel him, so as he had the tool, pipe in his hand, I maced him.
Where was he standing when you maced him?
Between our cars.
Between your cars?
Yes, ma'am. It was like 5 feet gap between 2 cars at a red light.
So he was standing next to the passenger side of your car?
Yes, ma'am, he did, with a pipe in his hand. And he hit my car so hard, I had photographs of that.
I'd like to see where he hit your car.
He put a hole in my door, middle door, that I have to bond to it now.
I'd like to see, just a second.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to see where it was hit.
And of course, the back window is shattered. So you see the dent in that car, how...
Just a second. Is this the passenger door?
Rear passenger door, yes, ma'am.
Rear passenger door.
Yes, ma'am. When the light turned green, I stepped on it to get out of there, and he didn't have the angle to get my door.
I'd like to see the police report, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Judge Judy continues in a moment. Ernest Hunter says fellow motorist Jason DeLeo pepper sprayed him during an incident of road rage. Jason is countersuing for car damages and a false arrest.
All right, now, Mr. DeLeo.
Yes, ma'am.
The story that you told the police was somewhat different from the one you just told me.
How so?
Very easy. You advised the police that Mr. Hunter,
right,
at the light, began to undo his seatbelt, and that's when you sprayed him.
Well, that was medication. He's coming out.
That's when you sprayed him, while he was still in his car. Then you said you sprayed him 2 more times, once he got out of the car with the crowbar.
Right.
But you told the police that you sprayed him because you were at the light screaming at each other like 2 idiots. And then he undid his seatbelt and was probably going down to get a crowbar.
Which is showing...
Just a second.
Yes, ma'am.
But he hadn't been down there to get the crowbar, Mr. DeLeo, because otherwise he wouldn't have gotten sprayed in the eyes, which he was sprayed in the eyes. Sprayed in the eyes, according to the police. So what you said to the police was accurate, or what you're telling me is accurate. Those are 2 different things, sir.
Right, I understand that. When he was making the gestures to go down on to the floorboard, he came back under his belt. At that point, to stop the action happening...
Stop the action happening, you take off in your car.
But there's a red light, there's crossing traffic. I mean, I would love to have done that, but I mean, it was... This guy was going to part my hair with a crowbar, and I didn't want that to happen.
Why don't you roll up your windows?
How's that going to break?
Why don't you roll up your windows, Mr. DeLeo?
He would have broken my window.
No.
There's no doubt that he got out of his car with a pipe. He admitted to that.
Mr. DeLeo, you were arrested.
Yes, ma'am.
And subsequently, the charges
were dropped.
Yes,
ma'am.
And had you filed a complaint against Mr. Hunter?
No, I did not.
Then you did not.
No, ma'am.
Mr. Hunter.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that he maced you before you got out of your car.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I do. And he has to pay for that.
Thank you.
I also think that you were a bit of an idiot to respond to him by getting out of your car instead of locking yourself into your car and pulling away by bending down and getting this crowbar that just happened to be in the front seat of your car and getting out and smashing his car. That's not a response.
No, ma'am.
But I believe he maced you first. Judging for the plaintiff for the amount of $2,500, and Mr. DeLeo, your counterclaim's dismissed. That's all.
Parties are excused. You may step out.
It's just our testosterone.
It was upsetting somebody to spray you.
We're grown men. We should know better.
Oh, I never had nothing burn so bad in my life.
But we didn't, and this transpired.
Tried water, just make it worse and worse.
And I think we're both a little sorry it happened.
Just stay calm and don't feed into the fire.